Now let's take a look at what the education sector gained or lost in the Indian budget of 2019. The biggest announcement was the allocation of 400 crore rupees for world-class higher education institutions for the financial year 2019-20. The government will focus on improving the skills of the youth in the fields of artificial intelligence, robotics and others. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman informed about the government's plan to bring in a national educational policy with the aim to transform India's education to global education standards. The establishment of a national research foundation has also been proposed. The body would assimilate the research grants given by different ministries independently from each other. The National Research Foundation will also fund and coordinate research in India. With the focus to attract foreign students, the government has proposed starting the Study in India program.
To upgrade the quality of teaching, the Global Initiative of Academic Networks, WION, program in higher education was started, aimed at tapping the global pool of scientists and researchers. The imprint or impacting research innovation and technology scheme began as Pan-IIT and IISc joint initiative to develop a roadmap for research to solve major engineering and technology challenges in selected domains needed by the country. Higher educational institutions are becoming the centers of innovation. These initiatives have upgraded the quality of education. There was not a single Indian institution in the top 200 in the World University Rankings 5 years back. I repeat, there was not a single Indian institution in the top 200 in the World University Rankings for 5 years back. Due to the concentrated efforts and concerted efforts by our institutions to boost their standards and also to project their credentials better, we have now 3 institutions, 2 IITs and IISc Bangalore in the top 200 institutional bracket.
And now we have a very special guest joining us here on this broadcast live. We have Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, the policy think tank of the Indian government. Mr. Amitabh Kant, pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for taking time out on this busy budget day to speak to WION World is One. I'm going to start off by asking you your initial thoughts and reactions to the budget.
I think it's a very forward-looking, very comprehensive, very progressive budget. Largely because if you look at the present-day scenario, there were certain headwinds. One was the issue of liquidity, which has been addressed by providing 70,000 crores to the banks for capitalization. There was a huge challenge on the NBFC and HFC side, which has been brought center stage in a very transparent manner. A regulatory oversight has been provided through RBI, but government has used this route of being a stopback by saying that for the first 6 months and up to 10% of losses for pooled assets, government will bear those losses. So that's a big step forward. But I think the important thing is that the government has pushed the buttons on strategic disinvestment, privatization, asset monetization. And all this, in due course, should lead to private sector coming in and playing a critical role. So the aim was to revive the animal spirits of the private sector. The more assets, brownfield assets you put into the market, the more private sector will come in. Credit flow will kick off, and that should be the objective. Economy grows on the back of investments, on the back of manufacturing, on the back of exports, and I think that should be our objective. The other big thing is that the FM, the finance minister, has put out about 100 lakh crores over 5 years for infrastructure creation. And this large inflow of resources which will come in for roads, for ports, for airports, will lead to private sector coming in, playing a critical role in creation of infrastructure projects. So my view is that all this put together makes for would ensure that we are able to kickstart the economy in a big way, ensure credit flow, and get the private sector kicking.
Fair enough. I want to ask you on those two topics. One is that the target set for a divestment, which is set to rake in over 1 lakh crore rupees. How achievable do you think that target is? And the other is the fiscal deficit target.
So on the disinvestment target, I'm extremely hopeful. In fact, hopeful to the extent that not only should it be met of 1,05,000 crores, but it should be crossed. And it's very doable if we push very hard. There's no reason why it should not be done. Only thing is that the process of transparency and competitiveness sometimes delays issues, but a lot of spade work has already been done. And more than that, the process of asset monetization should also enable us to push ahead in many of these areas.
And fiscal deficit, because the fiscal deficit, Mr. Kant, it's been the biggest worry going into this budget. I'm asking you because IMF to everybody has been talking about how India has some of the highest fiscal deficit in the world.
No, the finance minister has brought it down to from 3.4 to 3.3, and I think she's been fiscally very responsible, she's been very prudent, and yet she's pushed a lot of major reforms in many areas, but she's been responsible enough to be at 3.3. Now the important thing is that a lot of resources should get raised through disinvestment. A lot of resources should get raised through asset monetization. That is the route we should take. We should also ensure that we do capital expenditure, not revenue expenditure. And therefore, overall, to my mind, at 3.3, we should hold on to 3.3, be firm about it, be disciplined about it, and that should be a good step forward.
And you think it is achievable? The 3.3 target is achievable?
Yeah, because she's also raising cess through petrol, another rupee. She's brought in some other taxes, so I think it is very much doable.
Yes, and there is also the hiking of the duty on gold, and that's something that the common people of India who always resort to gold in these volatile, turbulent times as a safe haven for investment.
So my belief is that if you want economy to be a $5 trillion economy by 24-25, and you don't want to get taxed on any issue, and you don't want to get taxed even on gold, then it's very difficult to make India grow. I think all Indians must be prepared to pay a sacrifice. If we should be able to pay a sacrifice of 1 rupee on petrol, we should be able to pay a little bit of sacrifice on gold, because gold is held by rich people, the elite class, the wealthier class, and if we are not able to do that, then don't expect India to grow at those rates. It's a commitment to grow, and I think all of us are committed to that as a country, and all of us must contribute today so that India can be a prosperous nation 5 years down the line.
All right. On that point, the finance minister also said that the high-income people in India, the high-salaried class in India, need to contribute to the national development. There was talk of how the inheritance tax might make a comeback in this budget, but there was no announcement regarding an inheritance tax. But there is tax on incomes above 2 crore rupees.
Yeah, so there's a small bit of tax, and I think that is largely because there's very vast inequality in the society. There are huge, massive variance between people living below the poverty line. We implement a program called Aspirational District in the most backward districts of India, and the living standards in terms of education, health, nutrition are extremely poor. And I think if the government has to put focus on infrastructure as well as put education on health, education, all these areas, then I think a little bit of contribution from the super rich people of India is a must-do.
But you don't see this government adopting an inheritance tax anytime soon? No. So it is. I don't think there's been no announcement on the inheritance tax at this stage, and I think the government has decided not to impose it at this stage. All right, fair enough. I also ask one last question. In terms of what else do you think stood out apart from all this, the tax reductions and the infrastructure sector? If I were to pick one of your favorite announcements from this budget, what would it be?
So I think there are three remarkable features of this budget. One is a huge thrust and a huge impetus to startups, creating the best possible ecosystem, the world's best ecosystem for them. The second is giving a massive impetus to digital payments, which is huge. And the third is giving a push to electric mobility. And I would even go a little step further, and fourth would be the push towards large-scale manufacturing in new areas of growth like gigafactories, PVs, solar energy, etc. So 4 remarkable features.
4 remarkable features, and in the overall scheme of things, Mr. Kant, before this budget was presented, all the talk was about what happened at the elections, the kind of mandate that this government has, and in that sense, when Nirmala Sitharaman, the finance minister, says this budget sets a roadmap for the next 10 years, and that's the confidence that the Indian government is operating from, that's the confidence that the Indian finance minister is operating from, considering the way the economy is.
That's right. So there's a huge political commitment for growth. I've never seen this kind of commitment and this kind of vision and this kind of ambition and this kind of perspective to take India to a $5 trillion economy. Now, obviously, when you are planning a $5 trillion economy by 24, you need to bring in structural reforms across sectors. You need to open up the sector. You need to push for strategic disinvestment. You need to liberalize things, you need to make things easy and simple, you need to bring in ease of living, and all these are areas which have been focused on in the budget.
All right, Mr. Amitabh Kant, CEO of Niti Aayog, joining us here live on our broadcast. Thank you, Mr. Amitabh Kant, for taking time out and sharing your perspective on this all-important budget. Thank you so much. And with that, we need to be taking a very short breather here on the news on WION World is One. Our coverage and analysis of India's budget will continue on the other side. Don't go anywhere.